All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. So just to give you an idea of kind of where my presentation is going to be heading tonight, I'm going to start off by talking about the turtles we have in the Ottawa area, a little bit about why turtles are so much at risk these days, talk a fair bit about the kind of work we've been doing for turtle conservation, and end up by discussing different ways that people can get involved to help the turtles. And at the end, I'm happy to take as many questions as people have, and I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions. People can leave as they want, but I'm happy to answer more questions. So in the Ottawa area, we've got 6 species of turtles. So compared to learning your birds or all your plants, learning turtles is pretty straightforward. So there's the painted turtle. I'm sure everyone has seen painted turtles. Certainly probably our most common widespread species of turtle in the Ottawa area, and easily recognized by the red on the side of the shell. We've got the mighty snapping turtle, which is the largest turtle in our area. They don't bask as much as painted turtles, and I think we typically see them when they're crossing roads or nesting. There's the mighty northern map turtle. Map turtles are different than our other turtles in that they like big waters. So you're going to find them in lakes, you're going to find them in big rivers. So they're in the Ottawa River, they're in the Rideau system, but you're not going to find them in a swamp or a marsh. They look superficially a little bit like painted turtles. They get to be bigger, and they have faint lines on the top of the shell, which possibly look a bit like lines on a map, and that's where the name comes from. There's the stinkpot or eastern musk turtle, which is very rarely seen. Musk turtles rarely bask out of the water. I think I've only seen half a dozen over the last few years, and they're a fairly small turtle. Maximum size is about 10 to 15 centimeters, so they're pretty small. And you might find them in a big marsh. You might find them in the Ottawa River, in a back bay of the Ottawa River, or something like that. There's the extremely rare spotted turtle, which is our rarest species in the Ottawa area, and it's only found in a handful of locations. And last but not least, there's the Blandings turtle, which is, I think, the poster child for turtles and turtle conservation in Ottawa. The bright yellow throat, it's sometimes referred to as the turtle with the sun on its neck. And given the shape of the mouth and the jaw, it often looks like the turtle is smiling. So it makes it a very charismatic turtle. So in addition to those 6 species of turtles, there's 2 others, the spiny softshell and the wood turtle, which are also found in Ontario, but not found in Eastern Ontario. And this slide here shows the status of our turtles according to the federal government under the Species at Risk Act, or SARA. And under SARA, we've got 3 levels of being at risk. There's the lowest level, which is special concern. The next step up is threatened. And the final or most endangered step is actually called endangered. And as you can see here, we've got 8 species, and all of them, all 8 species, are now listed as species at risk by the federal government. So this makes turtles one of the most endangered groups of wildlife in Canada. And that's something that most people don't know. And that's even something that most wildlife biologists don't know. I talk to people who are working in fish research or bird research, and they're just shocked to find out that all our turtles are listed as species at risk. So that raises the question, why are turtles so threatened? And the first thing I always like to stress is that turtles are survivors. Turtles have been around as a group for over 230 million years. So turtles were around during the age of the dinosaurs. There were turtles when T-Rex walked the earth. The dinosaurs went extinct, but the turtles survived. So, they can take very hostile changes in the climate and the environment and still survive. So why are they at risk today? And basically a lot of it ties into the fact that turtles, broadly speaking, have three key life history traits, and those traits are working against them now. Those traits have worked great for the last 200 million years, but the game has changed, and it's very hard to change your life history traits. So first of all, turtles typically have delayed maturity. So especially this far north in Ontario and in Eastern Ontario, we're approaching the northern limit for all our species of turtles. So for something like a snapping turtle or a Blandings turtle, it might take 15 or 20 years for a hatchling to grow up and be old enough to breed. That's an extremely long time to have to survive, avoid predators, avoid cars, etc., etc. It also makes it very difficult for populations to respond to changes. If the population declines, and the turtles decide we need to have more offspring, well, it's going to take 20 years to get that new batch of offspring to be able to breed. It's a very long time. Second of all, turtles typically have high rates of egg and hatchling mortality. That's just natural. That's the way the system works. But one of the things that's happening these days is that populations of nest predators like raccoons and skunks and coyotes are doing quite well. So we're increasing the pressure on nests. So turtles are okay with moderately high levels of egg and hatchling mortality because it's balanced out by extremely low rates of adult mortality. Once a turtle gets to be close to being full grown, that hard shell is great protection against predators. And basically, most populations will have like 99% survivorship on an annual basis. That just means very, very few are likely to die. So what's changed, of course, is that we now have a landscape that's covered in roads, and we have lots of cars, and we have turtles, unfortunately, like to cross roads to get from one place to another. And so those rates of adult mortality of turtles on road take their toll. The kind of scientists that do population modeling, they can put all these numbers into equations. And it's pretty clear that if you take a turtle population and you just increase the adult mortality by 2%, that population will decline and eventually just disappear over time. So if you imagine a population of 100 turtles, all you got to do is have 2 turtles killed on the road each year, and that population is going to decline. That makes it very, very difficult to cope with situations with high road mortality. So those are kind of the 3 traits that are working against turtles in the modern age. So in 2017, the Canadian Wildlife Federation began a turtle conservation project in Eastern Ontario, and I was brought on board to kind of run the turtle project. The Blandings turtle, which is here on the slide, is kind of our main focus for our turtle conservation work, but we do work on all the species of turtles that are found in Eastern Ontario. And we kind of have 3 broad goals for our turtle conservation program. One is to try to find new undocumented locations with Blandings turtles because there's some habitat protection from doing that. Number two, we're working to reduce roadkill because we know that's such a major threat for turtles. And three, we're trying to increase the hatching success of Blandings turtles and other species of turtles. I should put in a plug for our website. It's helptheturtles.ca if you want to find out more about these turtle species or some of the work we do on turtles. So number one I mentioned was doing surveys to find more populations of Blandings turtles. We know where many populations are across Eastern Ontario, but we're trying to find areas that have observations or have populations that have not been documented. So typically in the month of May, we head out to swamps and marshes, and you can see the person here in the photograph. He's got his bug hat on, he's got his binoculars, and he's scanning all the logs, looking to see if there's a Blandings turtle basking. So if we can confirm a Blandings turtle at this site, there's extra habitat protection under the Provincial Endangered Species Act, and that covers this particular wetland and adjacent wetlands. But it's a fairly small area, so it means you need to have a lot of points across the landscape to offer protection to more wetlands. So typically we're going down to a swamp like this. We're making our way slowly around the edge of the swamp, trying not to make any noise to disturb basking turtles that might be quite skittish, and we're scanning all the basking logs. Now, if you look very carefully at this photograph, you may have noticed that there's a turtle basking in this photo, and that's exactly what we're looking for. A very small turtle in the distance basking that we can figure out if it's a Blandings or not. I'll give people a couple more seconds to see if they can spot the turtle, and then I'm going to zoom the photograph in a little bit. And there you can see the turtle on the log, and if you look very carefully, you can tell it's got a yellow throat, so it is indeed a Blandings turtle. So we would take a photograph, and typically I would zoom my camera in more than this to get a really good photograph of the turtle, record the location, and then we would submit this information to the government at the end of the season to expand the habitat protection for the turtle. So far, using this method, we've protected about 90 square kilometers of wetland habitat in Eastern Ontario. So it's not bad, it's a good start, and it protects the wetlands for the Blandings turtle, obviously, but everything else that depends upon those wetlands, the frogs, the aquatic plants, the dragonflies, etc. And of course, I should stress that this is habitat protection is a very fluid kind of term, and we're not turning wetlands into national parks or anything like that. But what it does mean, if there's going to be development occurring that would affect this wetland, there's going to be more hoops to jump through, and possibly those hoops would be sufficient to deter wetland development, or there would be requirements for the developer to do something to benefit the Blandings turtles somewhere else to provide a net benefit to the species. So the second part of our work involves turtles on roads. So we've been conducting extensive road surveys across the major roads in Western Ottawa, into Leonard County, and a little bit into Leeds and Grenville as well. So we're driving the roads, we're stopping for every single turtle we find on the road, whether it's alive or dead. We try to identify it to species, if possible, determine the size of the turtle, the sex, if possible, and of course, record the location of all these individual turtles. So, since 2017 to 2019, we've now found more than 1,400 dead turtles on the road. And that's certainly a staggering amount of roadkill. This map, which shows Eastern Ontario, each red dot represents a dead turtle we found on the road. And you can see that at this scale, at least, some of the roads look like they're continuous with dead turtles on the road. So if we zoom in to Western Ottawa, each of the dots here, if it's a single red dot, represents one turtle. And if it's a dot that's bigger with a number in it, the number represents the number of turtles that have been found at that location. So in the middle, you can see the yellow oval and two numbers there. So this is Thomas Dolan Parkway, and that's where the city installed their road mitigation fence last year. So it was certainly an area with a fair number of turtles. It's a complicated place to install fencing because of paths, things like that, making it difficult to have continuous fencing, but apparently the fencing is working pretty well. And you can see other roads have very few turtles, and some roads have quite a few. We typically have the most turtles around the Constance Creek area, Cameron Harvey, Dunrobin Road, and of course, Thomas Dolan Parkway. So we tend to have peak mortality around Constance Creek where it crosses those roads. And again, further north up here on Vance's Side Road, again, more turtles on the road. And fewer turtles on the road further north and further west as you get into more agricultural landscapes. So certainly across the landscape, roadkill is important, and in West Ottawa, it's certainly a key issue as well. We take all that data that I've showed you, and then we're looking for spots where turtles are found on the road in high numbers, large aggregations, which we call hotspots. And this is an example of our largest hotspot we found in Eastern Ontario. At this spot, we had 38 turtles in a stretch of road of only 400 meters. So in this image, the light blue areas indicate wetlands. So this is an example where you've got wetlands on both sides of the road. You've got turtles in the wetlands, and of course, they like to cross the road and, go to the wetland on the other side of the road. Not a big surprise, but the big surprise was just how many turtles, because this was our largest hotspot. In terms of road mitigation, this site worked out really well in terms of the fact that there was already a culvert under the road. So this meant once fencing was installed, there was a passageway under the road. Without the fencing, turtles will prefer to cross up and over the road, but if they're not given that option, many of them will cross through the culvert and get back and forth that way. There was also no driveways or anything that in this stretch of road, so it was possible to install fencing along the entire stretch of the highway here. So this was a provincial road, so it's owned and operated by Ministry of Transportation, or MTO. So we worked with them for a year or so, and they were going to be doing some upgrades on the road, and they agreed that as part of those upgrades, they would install fencing at two of the major hotspots on this road. So here's the fencing they installed at this site. It's a very small chain link fence, wooden posts, and as you can see, the wetland in the background. And at each end of the fence, there's a turner back with the fence, so this prevents turtles and possibly other wildlife from just going around the end of the fence and going on to the road. A number of projects have just installed a short span of fencing with no turn back And typically what happens is a lot of wildlife just follow the fence to the end and then try and cross the road and get hit. So you end up having perhaps the same amount of roadkill, but it's at the fence ends as opposed to the entire hotspot. So this fencing went up in the winter of 2019-2020, and we continued to monitor the site after the fencing went up, and there's been no roadkill at this hotspot since the fencing went up. So that's pretty impressive given the fact we had 38 turtles at that hotspot before the fencing went up. So we're very, very pleased with the results there. So far, based on all the hotspots, we've identified MTO put up fencing at 2 of their hotspots. Last year, we worked with the County of Lanark, and they put up fencing at 1 more hotspot. And we've got another fencing project, which we hope to have underway this spring. And of course, the City of Ottawa has been also fencing some hotspots, like on Thomas Dolan Parkway, also down near Roger Stevens Drive on Dwyer Hill Road. So we are seeing turtle fencing or wildlife fencing becoming kind of a standard feature when there's a need because of the certain species found in that area. So that's a big change I've seen in my career. 10, 15 years ago, talking to road managers or people who had say over these issues, it was like, what? You want to put up fencing for turtles? Are you crazy? But now, because of things like the Species at Risk Act, there's much more buy-in that municipalities have to be aware of these issues and do what they can when it's feasible and when it's economically possible. So at this point, a few sites are much safer for turtles than they were in the past, but of course there's many places where turtles cross the road. It's not possible to install wildlife fencing at all those spots, but there's still other things that all of us can do to help turtles that are attempting to cross the road. So if we're driving, and this is typically the month of May and June, seems to be the peak time for turtles to be on the road. If you are driving and see a turtle trying to cross the road or in the middle of crossing the road, you can try to assist the turtle if you have the time and it's safe to do so. So our standard advice for helping a turtle across the road is number one is take care of your own safety first. And so it's important not just to slam on the brakes and stop your car in the middle of the road. That's just going to cause a collision from behind you, probably. So pull the car fully off the road if possible. Put on the 4-way flashers. And just like your mom always told you, look both ways before stepping onto the road. If the traffic allows, then you can move onto the road, pick up the turtle. We recommend using 2 hands, like you can see in this photograph. It's a little bit like picking up a hamburger. And the benefit of having 2 hands on the turtle is that the turtle may not bite you or anything like that, but it might scratch. There's a very good chance it will pee on you. And if you're surprised, you might drop the turtle, and you don't really want to do that. But if you got 2 hands on the turtle, that's less likely to happen. And it's important to move the turtle in the direction it's moving. So typically it is crossing the road, heading the other side, and it's pretty clear which way it's going, and you want to move it in that direction. If you just take it to the back where it came from and drive off, quite likely in 20 minutes it's going to be back out on the road trying to cross the road again. And that's just the reality of the turtle will do what it wants to do. I also want to stress that sometimes you'll see a turtle crossing the road in a strange location, and you'll think, hey, it's heading that direction. There's no wetlands there. What's it doing? Why is it going there? I know, I'm going to move it down the road where there's a nice big wetland. That's a better spot for it. And while I understand the rationale behind that thinking, it's really not recommended. the analogy I kind of use is, imagine I'm driving someplace and I see you walking along the side of the road, and I say, that's not a very safe place to walk. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to grab you. I'm going to toss you in the trunk of my car. I'm going to drive to downtown Ottawa and let you out because that's a better place for you to be, and then drive away. Probably you wouldn't be too happy, and probably you'd try to make your way back home, and that's exactly what turtles will do. You could move them a couple kilometers down the road, but they'll probably just try to make their way back home. So it's much better to just haul them across the road and hope that they're safe wherever they're heading. Now, everything I've said is true for Blandings turtles and painted turtles, which are the two common turtles you're going to see on the road, aside from, of course, the big snapping turtles. And you have to be very, very careful when it comes to moving a snapping turtle. I don't recommend using your hands unless you've had some training from someone who can show you how to do it. If you grab a snapping turtle by the side of the shell, the snapper's neck is long enough that it can reach around and bite you on the hand. And you won't like that. I do want to stress that you may have heard things like a snapping turtle can snap a broomstick in half. And I just have to say that that's not true. They don't have that kind of bite force. They can certainly bite hard. They would break the skin. It's possible they might break a finger bone, but they're not going to bite off your finger or anything like that. But still, you don't want to get bitten by a snapping turtle. So if you feel confident, you can grab the back of the shell, back near the hind legs, lift the turtle up, which can be hard if it's a big turtle because you're grabbing from one end and you've got a lot of leverage off the front, and you can carry it off the road. But there's other ways of moving a snapping turtle. If you happen to have a shovel in the back of your car or your truck, you can use it to scoop the turtle up and carry it off the road. If you've got an old blanket, you can just throw it over the turtle and kind of just drag it off the road. The turtle might get a bit scraped, but that's much better than being hit by a car or truck. I'll also point out that we have a very short video we put together. It's only 1 minute in length on how to move a snapping turtle off the road. And you can check it out on our website, which, as I've said before, is helptheturtles.ca. And the third thing I want to point out is that sometimes we get there after the turtle's tried to cross the road and it's been hit by a car. And sometimes it's very clear that the turtle is dead. I don't want to be too graphic, but sometimes the turtle is flattened and there's just no question it's dead. Sometimes you can tell it's been hit by a car once and the turtle may be unresponsive, but it may still be alive. And so I really encourage you, if you do come across a turtle that is, it may have a cracked upper shell, but it may still be alive. And if it's taken to a rehab center, there's a good chance it will actually make it. And there's a couple of possibilities for options. In Ontario, we're very lucky to have the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre, which is based near Peterborough. I put their phone number here. And they actually have a network of volunteers across the province. So if you call that number and say, I found a snapping turtle, it's been hit by a car, I brought it home, they'll say, no problem, we'll have someone pick it up and we'll make sure it gets to our center in the next day or two. It sometimes takes a while, but they can make sure it is transported there free of charge. So that's one option. And locally, we're very lucky to have the Rideau Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, which is down near North Gore. And they can provide basic care for injured turtles. I'd say every year we're taking in 2 or 3 turtles that we find. And if the turtles have serious injuries, the Rideau Valley will have them transported to the Ontario Turtle Conservation Center, but nonetheless, they can do that first bit of medical care. It's kind of like the paramedics that come in to stabilize the turtle and get it on. So the Rideau Valley is open till about 11 o'clock most nights. So even if you find a turtle in the evening, if you feel very ambitious, you can drive it down to their place and drop it off. Otherwise, you can call them and try to figure out a way to get it to them. But I do encourage you to think about helping any injured turtle you see. A lot of the turtles we see that are hit by cars in June are adult females, which are the most important part of the population. So if that adult female dies, we're losing her, and we're losing all the nests that she will lay year after year into the future. And so I mentioned that turtles can take 15 to 20 years to be full grown, but they can live for 70 or 80 years. So that may be a 30-year-old Blandings turtle you found. And if she's nursed back to health, it's a good chance that she will continue breeding and laying eggs for decades to come. And so it's an incredibly important part of the population to maintain. And from talking to the main vet at the Ontario Turtle Conservation Center, even she has said she's had turtles come in which she thought were dead, and then they provide some basic care and the turtle starts to rally. It's just amazing, she says. It seems like they just kind of go into almost like a suspended animation, but they have incredible powers of healing given the right medical care. So that's something anyone can do over the next, say, 2 months as we start to see turtles on the road. So the third pillar of our work is trying to increase the reproductive success of turtles. So I'd just like to make sure we're all familiar with kind of the life cycle and the reproductive cycle of turtles. So in the Ottawa area, turtles typically nest from late May into early July, with most of the nesting in the month of June. It varies depending upon whether it's an early spring or a late spring, but typically the month of June is nesting season. So the adult females come out of the waterways, whether it's a lake or a swamp, and they look for a place to lay their eggs. And often they're pretty picky and they'll wander a fair distance, and that's where a lot of females are crossing roads. So this is an adult snapping turtle that's nesting on a beach in the Ottawa area. The turtles like an area that's open, so it gets full sun, and not too many plants growing on the ground, so that the eggs will get the benefit of the full sun hitting the ground. So the female digs a hole in the ground, she lays her eggs, covers the eggs back up, wanders away from her nest, and heads back to the water. And that's basically the end of her maternal job. Now, from a human perspective, we might think that turtles aren't very good parents because they just dig a hole and bury their kids and say, good luck. But it is the lifestyle that turtles have evolved to use, and it's worked for over 200 million years, as I've mentioned before. The problem these days, as I've also mentioned, is that nest predators have also increased dramatically. So this is a snapping turtle nest that's been predated either by a raccoon or a skunk. And we can tell it's a snapping turtle nest. You can tell the eggs are oval, they're round like a ping pong ball. And in Eastern Ontario, that indicates it's a snapping turtle nest. Our other turtles have all got oval eggs. So whenever you see something like this, a bit of a hole in the ground and a bunch of eggshells on the ground, that's a clear sign that nest predator has dug up the nest. If the eggs had hatched on their own, the eggshells would remain in the nest cavity and the hatchlings would leave, but there'd be no sign of the eggshells on the surface. So nest predation rates, as I indicate in this picture, are pretty high. More than 60% is common. In many areas, it's more like 80% or more. And it's been my experience over the past few years that, especially along some major roads where turtles commonly nest year after year, the raccoons know this. They must have their watch set. Oh, it's June, it's turtle nesting season. I'm going to go stuff myself until I can't eat anymore. And they seem to nail all the nests on some of these high nesting areas. I want to tell you one story from last summer. This is actually quite close to Dunrobin. My assistant and I were out in the evening looking for nesting Blandings turtles. We found a Blandings that was nesting very close to the road, kind of close to a driveway and a house. And this was maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. It was dusk, but we could see her. Looked like she was starting to lay eggs. You don't want to spook a turtle when they just start to lay their eggs or digging their nest out, because they will easily abandon their nest and come back another night. So we noticed where she was, drove away. I came back an hour later. She was still there. Good sign. She's probably nesting. And so we waited it out. We came back at midnight, drove by very slowly. She was still on the nest. We thought, okay, she must be going to be finished pretty soon. We came back at 12:30, so 30 minutes later. She had finished nesting and she was gone, so that was great. We parked the car, we got out, went up to the nest, and we found out that the nest had already been predated. So once again, at 12 o'clock, she was nesting, but 30 minutes later, the nest was already gone. So it was pretty clear a raccoon had probably noticed her nesting, and while we were waiting for her to finish nesting, the raccoon was also waiting for her to finish nesting. So that just gives you some idea of what the predation pressure is like. And that's right pretty close to Dunrobin, so it's right in West Ottawa. A lot of these nests don't have much of a chance at all. But there are many things that we can do to help the turtles. So this is a nest protector. Many of you may have seen these. We make them out of 2x4s with a wire mesh on top. The wire mesh allows the rain and the sunshine to get through so that the soil gets its moisture and the soil is kept nice and warm. In this photograph, Chris is hammering in spikes in at the four corners of the nest protector to keep it from being pushed around by a raccoon or a skunk. And then you can see he's also piled some big rocks in the four corners just as some extra deterrent to keep that raccoon from getting at things. And there's also 2 exit holes in each of our nest protectors. It's kind of hard to see in this photograph, but there's an exit hole right here and right here. So when the nest hatches out, the hatchlings make it to the surface, and then they can get out the exit hole. And as you can see in the background here, there's water right there. So they should make it to water and hopefully have a long and fruitful life. So we put together a PDF little one-page flyer on how to make a nest protector. So if you happen to have a property which has wetlands on it, or you've got turtles which wander from wetlands into your backyard and typically nest in your garden or something like that, and you're interested in making a nest protector, you can download this from our website. You don't have to be much of a carpenter. It really isn't that hard to make them. 1 8-foot 2x4, some wire mesh, some screws, and you can do it in a couple of hours. And this is one of our finished nest protectors, and you can see the exit hole on the side, which isn't very elegant, but it does work as long as it's big enough for the turtle to get out. So nest protectors work great, but there are some limitations with them as well. So the first point is that many municipalities don't like them to be installed along the shoulders of roads. If cars need to pull off, the car would hit the nest protector. There's a risk of the car popping a tire or an accident occurring. So typically we can't install these on roadsides, and yet we know that's one of the areas of highest highest nest predation. In addition, there can be a number of other poor locations where turtles lay their eggs, and these include things like construction sites, someone's driveway. If you get a pile of topsoil for gardening, you do it in June, there's going to be a turtle there nesting, and so you probably want access to your soil. Things like that. People's gardens, places where you might not want to install a nest protector. Unfortunately, there's also a risk of poaching of the nests. Some of you may have heard that a couple of years ago in Kingston, they had protected a whole bunch of snapping turtle nests near a big wetland. There were about a dozen nests with nest protectors on them. And towards the end of August, one night, someone came in, they dug up every single nest, and they stole all the eggs. So all that work for nothing. So about 200 eggs or hatchlings were taken away from that population. That's very frustrating, but it does happen. There's also a slight risk of predation. So some predators will be very, very keen to find that nest, and they can actually dig under the nest protector and get to the nest. We've installed quite a few nest protectors over the years, and we've only had one nest that was predated. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it can indeed happen. And the last but not least, there's also the risk of vandalism. So for example, last year, we had 2 nest protectors installed in a park in Ottawa, in kind of an urban part of the city, but close to the river. And the 2 nests weren't that far apart, maybe 10, 15 meters. We came back in September to check on them. The nest protectors were gone. So someone else wanted them for something, I guess. So vandalism is certainly always a possibility. This is another example of a poor nesting location. This is also from last summer. So a snapper had laid her eggs in this triangular median. So there were roads on all 3 sides of the median. So even if we had put a nest protector on top and the eggs hatched out, no matter which way they went, they would have to cross a fairly busy road. So it just didn't seem like a good place to install a nest protector. So instead, for those kinds of nests, we actually collect the eggs and we incubate them at our facility. Of course, the hard part is actually finding the turtle nests. If you're lucky, you find something like this, a turtle nesting, and snappers are kind of like the rototillers of the turtle family. They make a very big mess when they're nesting, and sometimes there's pretty clear signs after they're gone. That helps you to find a nest. But typically, you have to be there when the turtle's nesting to actually find the nest. So if we know a nest is in a location and we're going to excavate it, we typically start off with a hand trowel, especially if the soil is very gravelly, just to pull back the top 2 or 3 centimeters of gravel. Then we'll switch to our bare fingers to dig down deeper. And then once we're down a bit deeper, you're going to reach the nest cavity. So I'm sure you all know that this is a snapping turtle nest because the eggs are round like ping pong balls. And then we would take the eggs very, very carefully from the nest, one at a time. And then you can see me here in the bottom photograph. I'm marking on the top of each egg with a dull pencil and writing very, very carefully not to poke through the eggshell. And we do this because turtle eggs should not be rotated. The eggs develop underground. They very quickly develop a top and a bottom inside the eggshell. And so if you rotate the egg, the embryo will detach from the inner membrane inside the egg, and that will cease development of the embryo. So we're very, very careful to make sure we do not rotate the eggs, hence marking the top of the egg. We then place each egg in a container of soil just from the nesting area, and you can see here packing the eggs in so they're not going to rotate. And if it's a big nest, we might need a pretty big bin like this. And we then take them back to our building and we transfer the eggs to vermiculite. So we use standard Tupperware containers, but instead of the topsoil from the nesting site, we use vermiculite. Anyone who's a gardener knows that vermiculite's an artificial potting soil. It holds moisture very, very well, which is great for the turtle eggs. It's also good because it's pretty resistant to mold. So if we have an egg that's a bad egg, doesn't develop, and goes moldy, it's less likely for that mold to spread through the vermiculite to neighboring eggs. Whereas if we had topsoil, there may be mold in the soil which continues to grow and infects more eggs. So we use vermiculite, and that's a standard technique among people incubating eggs. Other photograph shows are a couple of incubators. It may look like just a box with a clear plastic door to it, but it's really a high-tech box with a clear plastic door. So it's got a heater, it's got a fan, and then each unit comes with a thermostat to control the temperature inside the nest box. And so that thermostat is just like the thermostat on your furnace to help maintain a constant temperature inside the incubator. And probably just like your thermostat, we have our thermostat set to be cooler overnight to try to give the eggs some kind of natural temperature regime that would mirror what happens in nature with being warmer during the day, cooler at night, getting a bit of up and down to that temperature over the course of the incubation season. And of course, the temperature is what helps the eggs to develop. But temperature is more important than just getting the eggs to develop. For most turtles, not all species, but for most turtles, the temperature that the egg is actually incubated at determines whether it's a male or a female. And that's a pretty bizarre concept for us because we don't think that if mom is nice and hot, she's going to have a girl. And if she's too cool, she's going to have a boy. It just doesn't work that way with humans or for mammals in general. But remember, turtle eggs are underground. Temperature is a very variable factor in their development, and it makes sense that temperature is a key thing in their development. So for most species, it's the cooler temperatures that will produce males, warmer temperatures, females, and in between that is the Goldilocks zone where you get roughly both half males and half females. And so for our incubators, we have to make that decision. Do we want it to be on the hot side and get 90% or 95% females, or do we want it to be in the middle and get roughly 50% of each? And so that's what we aim for, the Goldilocks zone. And that's for a number of reasons. We want to have both males and females in the population. And we know that roadkill also affects males as they move back and forth among wetlands. So that's our approach. to try to make sure we have both males and females in the population. So this is an incubator that's pretty full of eggs, and throughout the summer, after the nesting season, we're checking those eggs at least once a week. Each clutch of eggs gets examined to see if there's any moldy eggs. We weigh the nests. If there's been a water loss, we will add water, which is kind of like simulating the rain. And we do our best to give them the best care possible for the summer. And typically in about 2 months after the eggs are laid, we have liftoff. The eggs start to hatch open. And I can tell you that at least before the pandemic, this was always the most exciting day in our office. Someone would go in the morning and check on the eggs and come running out and say, "They're starting to hatch, they're starting to hatch." And we would have all kinds of staff people rushing in to see the hatchlings, because they certainly are quite adorable. So this is a snapping turtle. We can say this is definitely day one. It is cracked open the egg and it's half out of the shell. This is probably its first couple of hours being out in the light, looking around at this big world and deciding what to do next. Sometimes they will stay in the shell, kind of half in or half out for a day or so before crawling out. And then once they come out, it can be pretty active. So this is a hatchling Blandings turtle. So even at a day or two of life, you can see it still has the yellow chin of the adults. But the neat part in this photograph is the belly. You can see it's got this yellow oval on the bottom of the shell. And that's called the Yolk Scar. So inside the egg, when the embryo is developing, there's the yolk, and the yolk is going into the embryo to build a turtle. And the connection is through this yolk scar. And typically, I tell kids that this is the turtle's belly button, and that's where it's attached to the yolk. After it's absorbed all the yolk, all we've got left is this little soft yellow button. And then over the next few weeks, the shell will start to close. It'll cover up that yolk scar. And as the bones start to harden up, it'll turn into a normal shell, and there'll be no sign of that yolk scar probably by the next summer. So you can see from this photograph that hatchlings are pretty small. They're about the size of a loony or a toonie, so 2 or 3 centimeters in length. Really very, very tiny. Once 1 or 2 eggs in a clutch start to hatch, we typically get more and more hatchlings popping out. It's kind of like popping popcorn. You get a couple kernels that pop, and then the rest of the batch goes very, very quickly. So this is a batch of Blandings turtles. You'll note the oval-shaped eggs. And this is probably taken first thing in the morning. We've come in, a whole bunch of hatchlings have left the eggs. And so we'd be doing the work of moving them out of these bins where the vermiculite is, trying to give them a bit of a bath to wash off a bit of vermiculite, and then transfer them to some bins with water. We have some artificial aquarium plants in the bins to provide hiding spaces and just some structure, since they are going to be in environments with lots of aquatic vegetation. And we wouldn't put more than about 10 or 15 hatchlings in a bin like this. If it's a big clutch, we'll use two bins to split up the hatchlings. And we're waiting for the last couple of eggs in that batch to hatch out. Once every egg in a clutch of eggs is hatched out, they're ready to be released back in the wild. But before we do that, we measure and weigh every hatchling to keep track of the body condition, the size, and just to keep track of how our hatchlings look from every nest and see if there's anything we can do to improve our techniques. So I want to stress that for every single nest that we collect, we take the hatchlings back to the nearest wetland to that nesting site. Now, sometimes the nesting sites are roadsides often, and there's not going to be a wetland close by, so we have to find the nearest wetland. We don't want to release the hatchlings on the roadside. Likely some of them would go on the road and get hit by a car, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of our work. And sometimes, especially for the Blandings turtle, the nearest wetland may actually be over 100 meters from the nest site. And if you stop and think about a 2 or 3 centimeter turtle having to move 100 meters across the landscape, that's a pretty big odyssey. And that's assuming it goes in the right direction. If it doesn't go in the right direction, it just may not make it to water and it may just simply perish. So even the trek from the nest to the water can be quite treacherous, assuming the eggs even hatch. So over the past few years, we've now released over 2,000 hatchlings, which is a fair number. In the top right-hand corner here is a northern map turtle. I think these hatchlings are especially cute. So we've released a few of those, but they are particularly hard to find their nests. So we have not had too many map turtle nests. In the bottom left-hand corner are the hatchling Blandings turtles. So we released just over 300 of those. Again, they're hard to find their nests. And you can see most of what we're doing is releasing snapping turtles back into the wild. And there's a couple of reasons there are so many snapping turtles in our hatchling numbers. First of all, as I mentioned before, they are pretty messy nesters, so we can actually find a snapping turtle nest after it's been laid, assuming it wasn't predated. So that allows us to find more nests. And the second thing is that snapping turtles lay much larger eggs than our other turtles. So last year, our largest snapping turtle nest had 65 eggs, which is really quite big. In contrast, most Blandings turtle nests or map turtle nests only have about 12 to 15 eggs. So it takes a lot of Blandings turtle nests to equal a snapping turtle nest. So we're always keen to find more Blandings nests. It just takes a lot of work. So that's a few ways that we've been trying to give turtles a helping hand, so to speak. I'd like to wrap up tonight by talking about a few more things that people can do to help. So since everyone's in the Ottawa area, I really want to stress that people can report turtles nesting to us. And if it's a turtle nesting on a roadside, like this snapping turtle, we can come, we will collect the eggs and incubate them, and then we can release the hatchlings back into the wild. If the nest is on your property and it's a safe location, you can put a nest protector on it. If you don't have a nest protector built by then, contact us and we can give you a nest protector, either to give it to you or a loaner. We have a bunch in our shed to be used. But certainly for any nest that you find a turtle nesting that's a site at risk, like I mentioned before, in your garden, in your driveway, or roadsides like this, please contact us. You can send me an email. My email address is there. You can call my office number. The email address is probably the best way to reach me. If I come into the office and I've got 20 phone messages. It just takes me a long time to go through them all. Whereas the email, I can sort it much faster and figure out which ones I can respond to. So if you contact me, please give me the general location. It's off Thomas Stolen Parkway, for example. The nearest intersection is good. So you could say, it's west of Dunrobin Road, north side of the road, south side is good. And if you can give us your phone number, that's great, so we can contact you, so we can go out as soon as possible to rescue the nest. If you're available, you're happy to meet us there to help to excavate the nest, and to sweeten the deal. If you report a nest to us, we record your name and contact information, and when it's time for that batch of eggs to hatch out and the hatchlings are ready to be released, you can help us release the hatchlings. And you're welcome to bring kids and family to the release. And it is great fun for everyone who's done it. Doesn't matter how old you are, it is great fun to release the hatchlings. So I can't stress enough. Overwhelm me with emails and phone calls, and we will do our best to collect as many eggs as possible and give the turtles a helping hand. So remember, by end of May, we might be starting to see turtles nesting, and certainly by early June, they will be nesting. For snapping turtles, you can find them nesting at the sides of road or other places early in the morning. Even if you're out, say, as late as 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, you might see a turtle finishing up its nest. And if you do, you can just contact us immediately and we can be there the same day. And a lot of turtles also nest in the evening. So they're harder to find. After it's dark, it's much harder to spot these turtles nesting. But if you do see them, please consider reaching out to me. And like I said, you can help us release the hatchlings when it's time to do so at the end of the summer. So last but not least, I'd like to thank all the amazing people that have helped on the Turtle Project over the past few summers. It's been great to work with so many amazing young people who've been so keen and so passionate to work long hours, get bitten by black flies, and work late into the night to rescue turtle eggs. So that's all I've got to say for tonight. But if anyone's got questions, I'm happy to take as many questions as there are. So thank you very much for your patience.
So Dave, I thought we would go through the chat first, and then we could take verbal questions or more chat questions. And did you wish to read the chat yourself, or would you like me to read the chat? It's up to you.
Yeah, why don't you read the question and I can do the response.
All right. So the first is an observation from Sue. She said that you can actually drop off an injured turtle at the Humane Society and that they will transport it to Rideau Valley if you can't get there. So
it's worth knowing. I didn't know that. Thank you.
And then Sue asked, do you dampen down the nest after the protector is installed? She says, I've seen the turtles try and soften soil, but not much moisture was actually there.
We typically don't do that. We would just put a nest protector on top. My sense is that when the turtle is actually excavating her nest, there's a lot of fluid that can come out. And so the nest cavity itself is actually quite moist. But then when she fills the nest and covers the eggs, the top layer is going to be pretty dry. But when we've gotten a fresh nest, you scrape off the top layer, it's dry, and you get down to where the eggs are, and it's like, oh yeah, this soil is actually quite moist. And that's one reason why if you help a turtle across the road and it pees on you, it's probably an adult female, and that's kind of the bladder water she's got for moistening the nest cavity. But basically, they're just hoping the rains come and moisten the nest there's no harm to add a bit of moisture to the nest on top, but you don't want to drown the nest either.
All right, and then Erwin asks, are turtle eggs a delicacy to some?
It's certainly a delicacy for people who like sea turtle eggs. That's pretty common in many places around the world. It was like a traditional subsistence food. People could go out and collect a massive number of eggs from a sea turtle that laid her eggs. I really have not heard it for freshwater turtles. There's always possibility that someone's doing something like that, but not to my knowledge.
All right, and Chris asks, what is the mean temperature range set for the incubators, and is it species specific?
Well, again, it depends on what your goal is. And it does vary a little bit from species to species. So I don't really want to get into numbers, but around 28 is a good warm but not too hot temperature. And that'll probably get roughly 50-50 for most species. And a couple of degrees above that would be mainly females, and a couple of degrees below that would be mainly males.
Okay, and then Sue also made the observation you can make temporary protectors with old fridge and stove shells and stones to give you some time before you get the proper protector. But of course, you want to use the proper ones so that the hatchling could get out.
That's right. There's a lot of different things you can put down just as a temporary protection. We've tried using a couple of experimental things like a very flat nest protector. It's like a large mesh, like chicken wire with large mesh. And we found that there's the risk that the raccoons can dig through that and predate the eggs. So you want to make sure whatever you put down, the mesh size is fairly small so that you don't end up having the raccoons feeding anyways. But yeah, a grill works. I've seen people use the old plastic milk cartons or the milk crates, I guess is a better word. They've got kind of holes in them so water can get through. It's a good temporary measure. Yeah, lots of things you can put down.
Right. And another final question in chat right now is, what is the date that blandings and snapping turtle eggs typically hatch?
Oh, it's a big range, and it's going to depend upon when the nest was laid. So typically the nesting season, even if we just talk about one species, so we'll just talk about snappers, for example, we might find our first snapping turtle nest the first week of June and our last nest the last week of June. So there could be 3.5 weeks between the first and last nest. So assuming the nests were in similar conditions, their hatching dates would be off by about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then you got to factor in the fact that some nests are in hotter spots and some nests are in cooler spots. So we've seen nests with nest protectors with eggs hatching out early September, mid-September, late September, early October, mid-October, and beyond mid-October, it's really pushing the season and they may not make it if they haven't already made it to the surface. So it can be a big range, but typically in the wild, I'd say the very end of August to the beginning of October is kind of the range.
All right, another question came in is, do some eggs overwinter?
That's a great question. So as far as we know, the eggs actually do not overwinter in the nest. But for painted turtles in particular, sometimes the eggs will hatch out and the hatchlings will stay in the nest over the winter. But they stay in the nest as hatchlings, not as eggs. So they get the snow cover, they stay there all winter, and then come spring, April and early May, when that soil gets warm enough, those hatchlings will then dig their way to the surface and make it to water. So sometimes people actually find painted turtle hatchlings in late April, early May, and they say, well, the eggs have hatched already. And it's like, well, no, it's probably from last year, but it's just recently emerged from the nest. So that's true for painted turtles. It's also true for some map turtle nests, but it's not true for snapping turtle nests. Everything that I've seen about snapping turtle nests is that if the eggs may hatch out in very late fall, but if it's too cold in the nest and the hatchlings can't dig their way out, they will die in the nest over the winter. So that happens if it's just too late in the season, but the next spring they will freeze in the nest and die. Whereas the painted turtles apparently can withstand very, very slight freezing in the nest, which is quite remarkable.
All right, another question is, what is the northern limit to the Blandings turtle range?
Ooh, so it's north of Algonquin Park. I'd say it's getting up pretty close to Sudbury, which is pretty far north.
All right, so that would appear to be the end of the questions. And Dave, I would like to thank you for sharing your expertise with us. We are, as I said, recorded this, so it'll be available for anyone else to listen to. And I did want to say to people that with the money that we got from the Bell family, we are actually going to be making 10 or 12 nest protectors ourselves, Friends of the Carp Hills. And some of those we're going to be using for our own use on the Carp Barrens, but we will have them available for people locally as well. So that's part of our turtle conservation project this year, Dave, that we're also going to be hiring some mature students to help. We're looking for eggs early in the morning on the Carp Barrens during the month of June and along the road. So we're going to try to, we'll be able to pay some young enterprising people to do that and try to help the turtles in that Thomas Dolan area.
That's
so again,
fantastic.
Yeah, so it's fabulous. So I'm really excited to have the donation to do that. So again, thank you so much, Dave, for your expertise and time for the Friends of the Carp Hills. We really very much appreciate everything that you're doing to save the turtles.
My pleasure. And everyone's got my email address now. So if you have questions that come to mind afterwards, feel free to send me an email. I'm sometimes slow to reply, but I typically do reply after a day or two. I'm like a turtle. I am slow at times. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Spring. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good night.